Hello to all you liberty lovers out there. My name is Graham Helsabeck, reporting for heresyherald.com, facebook.com/heresyherald. I received an email this morning from a friend of mine. It was about guns, and it had a quote in it that I found interesting. It kind of got me fired up today. So I decided I'd make a little mini documentary, a little short film about it, about the gun issue. I think the Alex Jones and Piers Morgan interview on CNN actually reignited it a little bit. Obviously, the tragic school shootings in the last few years and the shooting in the movie theater by James Holmes in Aurora, Colorado as well added to that debate. And since then, many pundits have been commenting on it and having guests on. And the Piers Morgan interview with Alex Jones really fired up some of the pro-Second Amendment lobby.
Hitler took the guns. Stalin took the guns. Mao took the guns. Fidel Castro took the guns. Hugo Chavez took the guns. And I'm here to tell you, 1776 will commence again if you try to take our firearms. Doesn't matter how many lemmings you get out there on the street begging for them to have their guns taken. We will not relinquish them. Do you understand?
These clips and images will be important in understanding the gun debate, the reason that I feel that the Second Amendment should be protected at all costs, and that we as Americans should exercise our right to bear arms, even more so than we are now. That fostering a pro-gun environment will actually reduce crime. You might not believe that offhand. Some people would, on a gut level, believe that more guns equals less crime. Some people might not. I'm going to show you the real statistics, the data from university studies that back up all the claims. So we're going to start out with an interesting interview that I saw with a man named Patrice O'Neal. He was a famous comedian. He's dead. He passed away in 2012. Shortly after this interview, which was done in late 2011, he explained his views on guns. Very famous African-American comedian, and he was speaking about black perception of guns and about, quote, the crazy crackers in the hills, and how the blacks were basically brainwashed by the media and the government, as Eric Holder said.
We just have to be repetitive about this. It's not enough to simply have a catchy ad on a Monday and then only do it every Monday. We need to do this every day of the week and just really brainwash people into thinking about guns in a vastly different way.
And that these black folks in general are being brainwashed to believe these, quote, crazy crackers in the hills, end quote, are evil and anti-black or racist. Obama once said that, when he was running for presidency in 2007, said the rural farmers in Pennsylvania are clinging to guns, religion, and the part that gets left out all the time, antipathy towards others who aren't like them. Anti-immigrant sentiment. He went on and on. But people, I think, usually cut off the quote at God, guns, and religion because they don't understand, or they think the people are too stupid to understand what antipathy towards others who aren't like them means. It means racism.
When you go into some of these small towns in Pennsylvania, like a lot of small towns in the Midwest, the jobs have been gone now for 25 years and nothing's replaced it. And they've gone through the Clinton administration and the Bush administration, and each successive administration has said that somehow these communities are going to regenerate, and they have not. So it's not surprising then that they get better and they cling to guns or religion or antipathy towards people who aren't like them, or anti-immigrant sentiment, or anti-trade sentiment, and a way to explain their frustrations.
So Obama was saying that there are a bunch of racist white bigots who happen to be Christian, who are crazy crackers in the hills, who are hoarding guns because they hate black people.
But I'm looking at the Constitution, and for some reason, growing up black with just being black, the Constitution is poison words for black people because we feel we're not involved in it anyway. But the idea of freedom of the press, and then freedom to carry arms, why it's important, and this is easy, is because it's to protect us from a dictator. And all these things are trying to be destroyed so that a dictator can come right in and take over. But black people somehow in the system of just regular government, we feel ostracized from these words. We all, like even the crazy, what black people call the crazy crackers in the hills that say, we gonna kill you if you come on my property. Black people automatically think those people are crazy, but those people are the revolutionaries of our time. They live how the people who freed the country from England live. They think like that. But to a black person, whatever the news thing does, it makes us think that those people are insane and out to get me.
Patrice O'Neal was commenting about this, and he's saying that it's a shame that blacks have this perception that whites are racist because they own guns. You even heard people like Roland Martin's guest, the famous sports writer, saying that the NRA is the new KKK.
Why did you decide to focus on gun control as well when you were making the argument about the NFL?
Well, because, sports get so much attention and so many people tune out the real world that I try to take advantage of the opportunities to talk about the real world when sports lends itself to that and try to open people's eyes. I did not go as far as I would like to go because my thoughts on the NRA and America's gun culture, I believe the NRA is the new KKK.
Wow.
And that the arming of so many black youth and loading up our communities with drugs and then just having an open shooting gallery is the work of people that, obviously don't have our best interest. And I think it's obvious if you travel abroad and travel to countries where they actually have some legitimate gun laws, we don't have to have what we have here in America.
Even though the NRA was founded by Republican abolitionists who freed the slaves to arm recently freed black slaves, the NRA was founded to help black people become armed to fight the Klan. But now you've got, unfortunately, this perception in the African-American community that the NRA is evil, racist white people trying to intimidate blacks. Patrice O'Neal is saying, no, these are the crazy crackers in the hills are much more like the black community than people know. Blacks, on average, are more afraid of government. I can pull up the statistics to show that as well. I've done it before. I've written articles about it before. And blacks are more fearful of government, rightfully so, because our government, up through right now, up in the 70s, of course, 60s, 70s, they did the famous Tuskegee experiments. Those are only the most commonly known of thousands of government programs to brainwash African-American communities, inject them with different diseases, give them LSD tablets to see how they reacted with DARPA mind control. All of these are declassified government programs. It's just that the Tuskegee experiment where the government injected brain-eating worms called syphilis into black folks. The Tuskegee experiments were just the most documented and well-known of these many, many government experiments on black communities. But those ideas are there because they're there for a reason. Patrice O'Neal speaks to this. They are there for a reason. The Second Amendment is there for a reason, and it has very little to do with hunting. I hear the argument that you don't need an AK-47 to hunt. So many times is this big argument for anti-gun zealots who want to ban all guns, or at least get rid of 10-round mags, regardless of the fact that it does nothing to stop criminals from duct taping 2 or 3 of these clips together and just just slipping them back on back and forth. There's so many ways to get around that, and it's totally ineffective. I've got police crime report data to show that it's totally ineffective. We have statistics saying that violent crime's gone down 49% in the last 10 years. Ever since concealed carry has gone in nationwide, excluding about 6 states, crime's dropped over 50%, violent crime's down 56%. I've got all these stats and graphs to show you. Here you can see that in 1993, when the year CCWs came into effect nationally, and Florida first implemented them a little bit earlier, but you get a national move towards CCW, the crime rate goes down. You can see the graph. A lot of gun control activists point to leaded gasoline. So because of this argument that leaded gasoline was the major cause of violent crime increases, and that by unleading the gasoline, the government effectively reduced the crime rate, well, take a look at the Chicago example. 20 and 26% crime rate drop and violent crime rate drop just in the past year since they've implemented the concealed carry permits. You can see this graph breaks it down in a little bit different way. It's the same exact crime drop you can see starting right around 1993 when concealed carry comes in. But you can also see the exact type of crime that's committed using the colored lines. They all drop very sharply. Each one has a percentage, that murder and manslaughter drops 45%. 50% drop in forcible rape, 52% drop in aggravated assault, 49% drop in violent crime overall. And there's a very clear and distinct reverse correlation between the number of concealed weapons permit holders and the amount of violent crimes. You can see the shaded region of the back shows the number of gun ownership going up higher and higher and higher in reverse proportion to the number of violent crimes being committed. One rather wild misconception that the American public tends to have about American gun owners and concealed carry holders is that they might be more violent than most people. Actually, the stats prove the exact opposite. As you can see this graph, it is from the Texas Department of Public Safety, so it's not a nationwide type of survey, but you can see that in Texas, according to that Department of Public Safety study, concealed carry holders are much less violent. They commit less crimes in general, nonviolent as well. You can see the national stat in the other graph, the percentage on the top right that's also attached to this image, where you can see that nationwide, in states with more restrictive gun laws, robbery is up 105% higher, murder is 86% higher on average, assault's up 82%, violent crime in general 81%, and you can see the other breakdowns as well. But that overall, nationwide, in states that have tougher gun laws, violent crime's higher, crime in general is higher. Here you can see yet another example of less restrictive gun control measures actually reducing crime rate despite people's predictions. Anti-gun protesters were going irate in the summer of 2010 in the state of Virginia when the legislature passed a law allowing concealed carry permit holders to take their guns into restaurants and bars. A lot of people thought that this would lead to people coming in with guns and getting drunk, slamming down a bunch of shots and then shooting people in the bars. Of course, this turned out to be antithetical to reality as CCW holders came in and exercised their Second Amendment. Violent crime dropped not only in the entire state, but in restaurants 5.2% in the year directly following the passage of the bill. This clearly demonstrated effect of more guns equaling less crime would not at all be surprising to law enforcement officers, as proven by this PoliceOne.com online survey, a scientific survey conducted immediately following the Sandy Hook incident. PoliceOne.com interviewed a nationwide sample of police officers and found pretty startling statistics. Even for me, I couldn't believe how high some of these numbers are. Just a few samples here. I've included: what effect do you think the passage of the White House's currently proposed legislation would have on improving police officer safety? 61% said no effect at all, and then 25% said it would have a negative effect. So it would actually be less safe for police officers if there were fewer guns in the hands of private citizens. Number 5, what effect do you think a federal ban on manufacturing sale of semi-automatics would have? No effect, 71%. Negative effect, a shocking 21%. That's 93% saying it would be either bad or have no effect. Only a tiny 7%, 7.6% total said it might have some positive effect. Quickly looking also at number 14, what is your opinion of some law enforcement leaders' public statements that they would not enforce these laws if they were passed? 49% of these police officers said they would view this very favorably. Another 22% said favorably. So here you're looking at a huge number. Almost 70% of police officers would agree that it's a great idea to not enforce the laws because they are, unconstitutional and tyrannical. Number 15, if you were sheriff or chief, how would you actually respond to these laws if they were passed? 45% said they would actually not enforce these laws. They would join the opposition effort. And another 17% said they would, also not enforce it, but they would quietly do it and not make a big deal out of it. Finally, one more question that I wanted to point out in this survey, number 19. Do you support the concealed carry of firearms by civilians who have not been convicted of a felony and or been deemed crazy? Well, 91.3% said, yes, we support concealed carry of firearms. And of course, they've seen the stats. They've done all the digging. They've seen the evidence. They know that more guns equals less crime. It's proven over and over, ad nauseum, and yet there are still liberals who just want to take all the weapons, even though they deny it. I can play the clips, Dianne Feinstein, Mr. and Mrs. America, turn them all in.
If I could have gotten 51 votes in the Senate of the United States for an outright ban, picking up every one of them, Mr. and Mrs. America, turn them all in, I would have done it.
And of course, the terrible mass shootings are tragic, and it's very sad to see kids dead, especially during mass shootings at schools, and theater shootings like the Aurora, Colorado shooting a few years back. Very tragic. Like Joseph Stalin said, the death of one man is a tragedy. The death of millions is a statistic. Mass shootings are about as common as deaths from lightning strikes right now in the United States. Also on the same par as honeybee attacks. You're much more likely to die of a fireworks accident, slightly more likely to die of a shark attack. Much more common form of dying is bathtub drowning, and of course much more than that even is house fire. Very common way of dying, and above all those is car crash. Terrorism and mass shooting are tiny, tiny blips. The odds of each of these are documented. You can see the graph here. We've got others showing that the odds of dying in a terrorist attack, as highlighted, are 1 in 9.3 million. The odds of dying in a lightning strike are right at the same par, 1 in 10 million. About the same as dying in a plane crash as well, 1 in 11 million. You're twice as likely to die of scalded water, hot water in the shower. 2 times more people die of that than terrorist attacks. Much, much more likely to die of a snake bite, food poisoning, even more likely to fall out of bed and die, hit your head on the ground and die. And of course, you're about 10 times more likely, a little bit more than 10 times more likely to drown in your own bathtub. Much, much more likely, 15 times more likely to die in a train crash. And of course, auto accidents are much higher. Mass shooting deaths are calculated by the fact that 4 more people are killed. If 4 more people are killed, criminologists call that a mass shooting. Research out of Northwestern University conducted by James Allen Fox Lippman, Family Professor of Criminology, Law, and Public Policy, shows that in 2007, 23 incidents of mass shootings occurred. 2008, there were 29 incidents. 2009, 27 incidents. So roughly about mid-20s, about 25 incidents per year where 4 or more people are killed. This is right on par with the number of lightning strikes causing death each year in the United States. National Weather Service says that an average of 54 people are killed each year by lightning in the United States. Same report gives the probability of a person being struck by lightning at 1 in 700,000 if you're looking for a reference. Anybody that's alive and breathing and has a brain and hasn't been living under a rock for the last 10 years know that there is a long line of government measures to crack down on all kinds of activities to curtail the 4th, 5th, 6th Amendment, curtail the First Amendment to some extent as well. Edward Snowden had his revelations. Okay, we've been talking about Project Echelon and the National Security Agency, and that they've been tapping emails and phone and all this since 1996. Bill Clinton administration started that. The Wolf program, finding keywords. But look, everybody knows about the Patriot Act. Most people know about the Domestic Security Enhancement Act, also known as the Patriot Act 2, better known as the Patriot Act 2. But I find that most of my friends know more about the NCAA than the NDAA. This is probably the most dangerous law that's been passed since 9/11. This is the National Defense Authorization Act signed by President Obama on Christmas Eve several years ago, and it gives the government unrestricted access to grabbing any citizen of the United States and just throwing them in jail and locking away anyone they want to, throwing away the key. I'm talking about things like the Readiness Exercise 1984, better known as Rex 84, Continuity of Operations Program, Internment and Resettlement Operations of 2010, a very dangerous program. that documents fusion centers and places where citizens are to be housed in event of a national security emergency. Just rounding up citizens and throwing them in big camps, as was done after the Pearl Harbor attacks to Japanese citizens under the orders of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Also, we've got the civilian inmate labor camp program. All of these are documented. You can just type them in and look them up. I've got some of them linked here with screenshots and highlighted portions. Very dangerous measures. And also, we know that these types of programs have been implemented before. I mentioned the Pearl Harbor attacks. The Korematsu case overturned Delano Roosevelt's decision to intern hundreds of thousands of Japanese. Lincoln also did this. His was the first major suspension of writ of habeas corpus during the 1860s. Obviously, the Civil War was going on, and tens of thousands of Southerners, men, women, and children were thrown in jail, non-combatants. We've also had more minor suspensions of writ of habeas corpus, such as was the case during the Boston bombing search for the second suspect, the younger Tsarnaev brother who was hiding unarmed in the boat with a tarp over him. But those families were held at gunpoint. Look, I understand these police officers were facing a very difficult situation. They were facing the unknown. The point is, it still happened. It's very scary for the families as well. They're just living their normal lives because there's one unarmed kid in a boat. I know they didn't realize that. It was a tough situation. But then later on, politicians, people on Capitol Hill later lied and said it never happened. Look, it happened. We got to move on, do the best we can from here. Perhaps the most horrific modern example of the suspension of habeas corpus came in 2005 after Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, Louisiana. In that instance, you saw Mayor Ray Nagin coordinate with the police chief to exercise a total martial law operation and confiscate all guns, no matter who you were, where you lived, what your job was. It was door-to-door confiscations. The police chief went on television in a press conference and said, quote, "No one will be able to be armed. We will take all the weapons," end quote.
We will take all weapons.
You had examples of Ms. Patty Coney and others having their guns taken, being tackled, shoved into walls. Connie was a 90-something-year-old lady who was slammed into her wall because she had an old pistol in her kitchen that she was using to protect herself.
Patty Connie is still trying to recover physically and emotionally.
They really did a number on me.
From the day police forced her from her home.
It was traumatic. All of a sudden, they were banging on the front door, the side door, and the back door. They said, "Let us in."
Patty tried to explain. She was on dry land. She had plenty of food and water and didn't want to abandon her dogs. But it didn't matter.
If you see 6 or 8 police that look like linebackers pushing you in a corner, you're in shock. I'm saying, "Look at all my food. I got plenty of food." They kept pushing me back, and ended up like this.
Then, Patty showed them a small revolver she was carefully holding in the palm of her hand. A camera crew was there to capture what unfolded next.
I said, "It's not even loaded." And I dropped it on the floor.
You got a gun, relax.
Well, they punched me in the face.
Relax now.
Look at my black and blue marks. Look at what they did to me. They dragged me out of here. I really thought they were going to kill me.
Many disturbing images have.
We also have testimony from people like the minister in the Superdome saying that people were held there at gunpoint and they were just like prisoners. There were people dying inside, and yet nobody was allowed to leave.
Unspeakable breakdown of law and order. KTVU's Ken Wayne went to New Orleans, where he talked to California rescue workers who experienced the horror firsthand.
The hellish conditions inside the Louisiana Superdome were so bad, even those who were there have trouble describing it. The team chaplain waded into the crowd to try to calm things down.
I was in jeopardy. In fact, this collar did not serve me well, because people rushed me, begging, pleading to get out of there. They would say, They would say, please, 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 get us out of here. And these are Americans. These are human beings that had lost everything, and they felt like prisoners.
You had to do some last rites?
Oh, numerous times. And in fact, there were people who would die in my arms. It was a terrible honor.
After 16 frantic hours, California 6 got the word to get out.
We had to leave the patients. Never done that in my life. We felt awful about it.
We really felt like we made a difference for some. We wish we could have done more.
I, like most Americans, believe that the Second Amendment.
So look, we're Americans. We know why it's important to be self-reliant, and it has basically nothing to do with hunting, no matter what Obama may say.
That passed on from generation to generation. That hunting and shooting are part of a cherished national heritage. But I also believe that a lot of gun owners would agree that AK-47s belong in the hands of soldiers, not in the hands of criminals.
We know that governments have been responsible for heinous atrocities in the past. This is obvious and well documented. University of Hawaii study shows that 262 million people were killed by governments lined up and shot in the 20th century alone, the biggest number making up this chunk of human lives lost, of course, being Chinese starvation under Chairman Mao. According to the Chinese government, 84 million people killed under Mao. Amazing. Hitler killed less than Stalin. Of course, Mao killed more than both of them. It all adds up when you add Pol Pot and some of the others in there to 262 million people. Other governments have done horrible things. It is possible for bad people to get into control, and that is the reason why the people should be armed. You should not defang and declaw the American lion. Keep guns in the hands of honest, law-abiding citizens. That is the best way to stay safe. That is what the police officers say that needs to be done. There is no other way to protect your family. 911 will not help you if there is a burglar in your house with a gun taking your items away, raping your wife, holding your child at gunpoint. If you dial 911, they're not going to be able to get there in time. There's only one way for you to protect yourself, and that's to own a gun. Exercise your right or lose it. Thanks for watching. Signing out, Graham Helsabeck at heresyherald.com.